I don't use DCAs anymore unless I absolutely have to, and quite frankly, I don't have to. I can't think of a strong enough argument that makes a DCA better than the other alternative, which is an IDCA. Now, this is not a tutorial, but instead I want to share my thought process, how I think about DCAs and IDCAs and why use it or why not use it. So if you want a tutorial, I already made it. I'll link it up here or in the description below. Why am I even talking about this? When you use DCAs on a console, at least let's say on the M32 console, the physical control surface, you have them always on the first layer on your right-hand side. You see them. But if you're on another layer or you're mixing on a more compact console or your phone or your tablet or control app, you don't always see the DCAs. They are not always in front of you. So what I noticed is that people often forget that they changed the level of the DCA because it's not in front of them. So they will lower the fader of the DCA and then pushing the faders of the channels, and it's still quiet and you're pushing them too high and you're wondering why it's so quiet. It wasn't like that. It was loud enough. And then you realize that someone pushed down the DCA fader. It's really frustrating. What a DCA does is that it does not control the faders of the channels. Instead, it controls the audio level that is coming from these channels to the main left-right or to a subgroup, because the DCA controls post-fader signals. Okay, so if you raise it or lower it, you're not affecting the monitors, you're affecting the main left-right or the subgroup that you're using. If you also mute the DCA, it does not mute the channels, it only mutes the post-fader signal. Monitors have a pre-fader signal, so the mute of the DCA doesn't affect the monitors unless you go into the configuration of the console and you activate DCA groups, then the mute of the DCA actually mutes the channel and it doesn't go to the monitors anymore. Why am I talking about this? Because I want to compare it to the IDCA. In the Mixing Station app, if you use IDCA, first of all, you can use as many of them as you want. There's no limit on the number of IDCAs that you can use. And IDCAs do not control audio, they control faders and buttons. That's really important because with the DCA, you are getting the audio out of the channel into the DCA and then raising or lowering it. So if you change the level of the DCA, you can't see that reflected on the channel. And if you change the level of the channel, you can't see that reflected in the DCA. But with an IDCA, they work alongside each other. So if you change the faders of the channels, the fader of the IDCA will change with it. If you change the fader of the IDCA, the faders of the channels would change with it. If you have an IDCA lowered, there's no way that you will not know that it is lowered because you can see the faders of the channels also lowered. When you mute the IDCA, it also mutes the channels. Now, the difference between the IDCA and the DCA, with the DCA, you can choose if that mute actually mutes the channels or only mutes the post-fader signal of the channels. But with an IDCA, it will just mute the channel. So you can't just mute it to the main left-right. It actually mutes the entire channel. But what if you want to remove these channels from the main left-right for a certain period of time? Maybe the musicians are practicing before the show and you still want to give them their audio in their monitors, but you don't want it in the main speakers. You can just turn down the IDCA because it will keep the proportions between the faders intact. So even if you turn it all the way down, yes, the faders will all come to -infinity. But if you turn it up again, they will come back to the balance that you did. So in my humble opinion, I think an IDCA is a lot better than a regular DCA. Now, if you don't agree with that, you can still use DCA. I'm not telling you this is in all cases better or this is in all cases worse. I'm just sharing my experience with you. If you don't have the DCAs always in front of you, I think it's a better option to use an IDCA instead.